Completed our 2024 regular season simulation. We've now completed the conference championship game, so it's time to find out who is in the college football playoff. We're going to go through, show you what the top 25 would look like, and then the playoff bracket. If you missed the conference championship games yesterday, you can watch those, go back and watch them. But we saw Florida State defeat Syracuse in the ACC championship, Georgia over Texas in the SEC championship, Ohio State beats Oregon in the Big Ten championship, and then in the Big 12 championship, Arizona defeated Cincinnati. So those were the conference championship games. We've got those results now. And these rankings are based simply off of resume. There's no eye test here. It's a video game. I just looked at the numbers, looked at the resumes, and that's how I ranked the teams, and that's how I got the playoff field. And there is a 10-2 team left out of the college football playoff. So we did not have enough spots for all the 10-2 teams. This could very well happen in real life. I believe last year a 10-2 team would have been left out. And also, if you're wondering about the group of 5 teams, we didn't have rosters for those teams. So we're just going to be Power 4 teams in this playoff. There will be no group of 5 team. When we do this again with the new game, I will include the group of 5 because we'll have all the rosters. So let's get right into it. We'll start with the rankings 21 through 25. We've got SMU at number 25, Utah 24, Clemson 23, Nebraska 22, and Michigan 21. And again, you see an 8-4 team ahead of 9-3 teams because we looked at the resumes. We looked at the resumes, and that's how we ranked these teams based off of what I felt like the College Football Playoff Committee would do in real life. If you don't like them, I'm sorry, but again, I tried to be unbiased here. This was 21 through 25. None of these teams had a chance to make the playoff, but still had very good seasons. Nebraska at 9-3, that'd be a pretty good year for them. You see 16 through 20, Northwestern at 8-4. Remember, they did beat Michigan, and so that's why they're ahead of them. But they had a very good season. Auburn, Oklahoma also 8-4. Cincinnati 10-3 after they lost in the Big 12 championship game. They do drop a little bit. Don't have a great resume, but still a solid ranking at number 17. And Alabama at number 16. So the Crimson Tide not quite in the playoff after losing 3 games. And then we go to 13 through 15, and the teams that just missed out, USC and Tennessee, both 9-3, played pretty tough schedules, had good resumes, but the 3 losses was enough to keep them out. And Penn State was the one team that did not get in, and it was very, very, very close. Penn State did have a win over USC, but that was really their only marquee win. And what really knocked them out was the loss to Purdue. Purdue was pretty bad, and that bad loss is really what kept them from getting into the top 12. And you also have to remember when we talk about resumes, we have to look at how the teams finish, the records of the teams in these simulations. So teams that underperformed, you might say, oh, well, they beat this team or that team. Well, that team might have gone 4-8 in these simulations, and so you have to keep that in mind. So let's get now to the playoff bracket. The first 12-team playoff will happen in real life this year, and again, we're going to simulate it on NCAA Football 14 with updated rosters. And remember, this is going to start tomorrow. Round 1, Saturday, quarterfinals, Sunday, semifinals, and then the national championship on Monday night. And then we start it all over again with the new game, EA Sports College Football 25, and we'll see how the 2 games compare. All right, we get to the bracket here. Orange Bowl and Cotton Bowl, those will be the semifinal matchups. And we know the top 4 seeds. We maybe don't know the order, but Georgia, out of the SEC, they are going to be the 1 seed. Had the best resume. You look at what they did this season. Only 1 loss on the road at Texas. They beat Ole Miss, who was 11-1. That was the only loss for them. They beat a 9-3 Tennessee, beat an 8-4 Auburn, a 9-3 Alabama. I mean, they had a phenomenal resume. A 9-3 Clemson. This was not even close. This was clearly going to be the number 1 seed. The number 2 seed, Ohio State. So the Buckeyes finished with just 1 loss. They also had a really, really good season. That loss did come to Michigan, though, and that was kind of a wild game there to close out the season. But they had wins over Oregon, beat them again in the Big Ten Championship, over Nebraska, over Penn State. So they had a Northwestern. They had a solid resume as well. So Ohio State right there at number 2, and they were these 2 teams clearly ahead of the ACC and Big 12 champions. But we do have Florida State at number 3 out of the ACC, and they will play in the Fiesta Bowl. We'll take a look now. We're talking about Florida State's resume. They had 2 losses. Yes, they did have 2 losses. Lost to Miami and Notre Dame, but those are 2 really good teams, and they had wins over Clemson, had wins over SMU, even a win over Duke, which was a pretty good win. Duke was 8-4. So a solid resume for Florida State. Not great, but solid. And again, you have to take the conference champions here in the top 4 spots. And then, of course, they did beat Syracuse, who was undefeated, beat them in the ACC championship. And then finally, it's Arizona in the Big 12. Out of the Big 12, they will play in the Rose Bowl. They win the Big 12 championship over Cincinnati. Resume not quite as good as Florida State's. Lost to Kansas State and TCU. Didn't really have a lot of great wins. But what's interesting here as we get into the rest of the teams is how bad the Big Ten was. And it wasn't bad, but there weren't a lot of teams that had a chance to get in out of the Big Ten. And so that's interesting. The SEC going to dominate the field, as you will see. And we're going to go to number 5, and that is Ole Miss. The Rebels finish 11-1, only loss coming to Georgia. Had a really, really strong season, and they are the top at-large team. Resume was pretty solid for them. Had wins over LSU, Oklahoma, and again, that one loss coming to Georgia. That's the big deal there, as that's the only team that beat them. And then at number 6, we got Texas. Texas, they lost 2 games. One of those, though, was in the SEC championship. It hurts them, though, that they lost their final 2 games. They lost to Texas A&M in the final regular season game, and then lost to Georgia. But they did beat Georgia in the regular season. They also beat Michigan. So it was enough for them to get to number 6. Number 7, Oregon. Oregon only lost to Ohio State, but they lost to them twice. You look at the resume for the Ducks, and again, the losses are really good losses. Losing to Ohio State twice, can't get much better than that. They didn't really have a lot of great wins. Beat Michigan, but again, it's more about the losses here and the fact that they only lost 1 game in the regular season. All right, number 8, we go to LSU. LSU finishes with just 2 losses, only 1 loss in the SEC. They lost to USC and they lost to Ole Miss, so lost to 2 really good teams. But they beat Texas A&M, they beat Alabama, they beat Oklahoma, so a pretty solid resume despite the 2 losses. Number 9, Texas A&M. These teams met in the regular season, and that game went to LSU. We'll see what happens this time. Texas A&M lost to Florida. That was not a great loss, but also the other loss again came to LSU. They beat Auburn, they beat Texas, and those are the final 2 games of the season. So they come in with some momentum. Also beat an 8-4 Missouri team. Also beat a 10-2 Notre Dame team. So really, without the head-to-head, you wonder with Texas A&M, maybe should they be ahead of LSU here? But head-to-head definitely matters, and that's the matchup there. So that game will be in Baton Rouge. Number 10 is Notre Dame. Notre Dame finishes 10-2, had a very strong season. Wound up, they lost to Texas A&M, they lost to USC. Those are top 15 teams. They beat a pretty good Louisville team, and then they beat Florida State, who is a top 4 team. So that's the big win for them on the resume. Number 11 is Syracuse. Lost no games in the regular season, only lost in the ACC championship to Florida State, so only 1 loss. But when you look at the resume, it's not great, and that's why this team is where they are. But they did beat Miami. That's the one win that you can look at and say, yeah, they did beat a good Miami team. Miami finishes 10-2, and speaking of Miami, they're actually number 12. So we have 3 ACC teams in here as the Hurricanes finish number 12. You look at the season for this team, they beat Florida State, and that's the big one. They beat Florida State, who wound up winning this conference. Losses to Louisville and Syracuse, so lost to good teams. They beat an 8-4 Duke team. Again, it was very close with Miami and with Penn State, but when you look at Penn State losing to a bad Purdue team, that really was the difference in these 2 teams. Purdue finished with just 4 wins. They were just 4-8, so that was a really bad loss there. So there you go. That is the playoff field. This will start tomorrow as we'll go again through round 1. Quarterfinals will be on Saturday, semifinals Sunday, and championship on Monday night. Give me your predictions for this 12-team playoff down in the comments below.